"I don't want to be near that old witch," my daughter-in-law hissed, loud enough that I felt the words land on my back like cold rain. And in that instant I understood something I never wanted to learn at my son's funeral. Grief doesn't soften certain people, it sharpens them. My name is Margaret Hale. I'm 66 years old, and I was standing just outside St. Andrew's Church in a small Ohio town, clutching a folded program that had my son Ethan's photo on the front. The sky was the color of dirty cotton, the wind cutting through my coat as if it could find every weak seam and tug. I wasn't crying anymore. Not because I didn't want to, but because I'd cried until my face felt unfamiliar, until my throat burned and my eyes ached like they'd been rubbed with sand. Through the glass doors I could see Brittany Hale, Ethan's wife, moving like she owned the air in the room. She was in a fitted black dress, hair perfect, mascara untouched. She held court with my sister-in-law and a few cousins, her hand fluttering like a conductor's baton as she decided who stood where, who spoke when, who sat in the front pew. And then I saw it. A pale envelope in her hand, the kind funeral homes use when they pass along personal effects, the kind that should be delivered quietly, respectfully, to the next of kin. She glanced down at it, slid a thumb under the flap, and tucked it into her purse with a quick, practiced motion, like a woman pocketing something that already belonged to her. My heart didn't race. It went still. I stared at the purse, at the clean line of her wrist, at the way she turned her body to block anyone else from seeing. Ethan used to do that with me when he was a little boy. Shield a scraped knee so no one would fuss, hide a broken toy so he could fix it himself. Brittany's version wasn't protection. It was possession. Someone brushed past me in the vestibule and murmured, "Are you with the family?" As if I might be a stranger who wandered in off the street. I nodded once, unable to trust my voice. The scent of lilies drifted out, sweet and suffocating, mixing with floor polish and the faint burn of coffee from the reception tables. The church bell didn't ring. It just waited. Brittany's eyes flicked toward me, and her smile didn't reach them. I watched her mouth form words to the woman beside her, small, sharp, meant to sting, and I saw the other woman's face tighten with a nervous laugh. That's when Brittany said it again, clearer this time, as if she wanted to make sure it traveled. "I don't want to be near that old witch." I could have turned. I could have walked in and made a scene that would live forever in everyone's memory, as the day Ethan was buried, and his mother lost control. Instead, I lowered my gaze to the program in my hands, to my son's name printed in careful ink, and I made myself breathe. One breath. Two. The paper trembled anyway. In my coat pocket, my fingers found the small silver key Ethan once gave me just in case. And for the first time since the hospital called, a thought broke through the fog. If Brittany was hiding something today, she wasn't doing it for love. And if she wanted me small and silent, she had chosen the wrong woman to corner. The doors to St. Andrew's opened and closed with a soft sigh as people filtered inside, shaking off March damp from their coats, lowering their voices the way Americans do in churches even when their hearts are too loud to contain. I followed the stream at a distance, as if grief had made me heavier, as if my feet were learning a new kind of walking. The sanctuary smelled of lilies and lemon cleaner, the kind of bright scent that tries to pretend everything is fresh. Up front, Ethan's framed photograph sat beside a simple arrangement. His smile caught in a moment from years ago when his hair was still thick and his eyes still had that boyish light. He had been 38. I kept saying the number in my head as if repeating it could make it make sense. Brittany stood near the first pew with a small cluster of relatives around her, her hand resting on the elbow of Pastor Whitman as though she was the one guiding him. When she noticed me, she gave a glance that slid past my face and landed on my hands, on my coat, on the program I carried, and then she turned away like the decision had already been made about where I belonged. My sister-in-law, Dana, leaned in and whispered something to Brittany, and Brittany nodded with a thin smile. A moment later Dana came toward me with careful steps, the kind people use when they are about to deliver news they pretend they did not choose. She did not meet my eyes. She looked at the pews instead. She said, "Margaret, we thought it might be better if you sat a little farther back. Brittany is overwhelmed and she needs space." Space. As if a mother's grief had edges that could bruise someone. I stared at the front row where I had imagined sitting, close enough to see Ethan's face without squinting, close enough to pretend the world still had order. I could have argued. I could have reminded Dana that I had held Ethan on the day he was born, that I had rocked him through fevers, that I had driven 3 hours in snowstorms to make his college games. Instead, I heard my own voice come out steady, almost polite. I said, "Of course." The word tasted like pennies. I moved to a pew halfway down the aisle, near a stained glass window that painted the wood in dull blues and greens. People glanced at me and then away, some with pity, some with discomfort, some with relief that the awkward part had been handled by someone else. Brittany remained at the front, accepting hugs like a public figure, her shoulders angled to keep her body between me and the casket. When the organ began, I listened to the notes swell and fall, and I watched Brittany's purse on the pew beside her, the same purse where she had tucked that pale envelope. Every time she adjusted the strap, every time her fingers touched the zipper, my stomach tightened. I did not know what was inside, but I knew the feeling of something being taken. I had been feeling it since the hospital, since Brittany answered Ethan's phone, since she spoke to the nurses as if I was a distant acquaintance. Pastor Whitman started to speak about comfort and seasons, about gathering and letting go, and I fixed my eyes on Ethan's photograph. I promised him silently that I would not make this day uglier. But I also promised something else, something quiet and firm. I would not let anyone erase me from my own son's story. After the last hymn, people rose in waves, and the sound of wooden pews creaking felt louder than any sob. Pastor Whitman offered a final prayer, and then everyone began to move toward the fellowship hall for coffee and small plates of food arranged by volunteers who meant well. I stayed seated for a moment, letting the crowd thin, because I could feel Brittany's attention like a fingertip press between my shoulder blades. When I finally stood, my knees complained, and I steadied myself on the end of the pew. I could handle the ache in my joints. It was the ache in my chest that made me careful. In the hallway, I paused near a table of condolence cards, each one signed with tidy handwriting and polite phrases, and I watched Brittany work the room with soft smiles and selective tears. She leaned into hugs. She touched forearms. She kept her voice low like she was sharing something sacred, and then I realized what she was doing. She was planting a story. I saw it in the way Dana's eyebrows lifted, in the way my cousin Cheryl gave me a look that slid away too quickly, in the way a neighbor I barely knew offered me a tight smile and said, "It has all been so hard on Brittany. Not on Ethan. Not on me. On Brittany." I stepped into the fellowship hall and the smell of brewed coffee and sugar hit me, warm and ordinary, almost insulting in its normalness. There were ham and cheese sliders, cookies, paper cups, and a guest book open to a clean page, as if grief could be organized like a potluck. Brittany stood by the guest book, strategically placed, greeting people as they signed, her purse hanging from the crook of her arm like a badge. The pale envelope was not visible now, but I knew it was in there, riding close to her body. She spotted me, and her expression changed just enough to notice. Her eyes softened, her mouth curved, and she wore the face of a woman who wanted witnesses. She walked toward me with careful steps, stopping just close enough that anyone nearby could hear without feeling like they were eavesdropping. She said, "Margaret, I really hope today can stay peaceful. Ethan would have wanted that." Her tone was gentle, but the words were a leash. Peaceful meant quiet. Peaceful meant obedient. I looked at her and saw how she had dressed grief like armor, how she had turned the day into a stage where she could be the only person allowed to suffer. I replied, "I want peace too." My voice stayed even and I did not step back. Brittany tilted her head, as if disappointed that I had not snapped. She lowered her voice further and added, "Sometimes people make things about themselves. I just do not want any drama." She said drama the way someone says disease. Then she turned slightly so her side faced me and her front faced the room, her eyes flicking to the nearest cluster of relatives. It was a performance and I understood the trap. If I protested, I would become exactly what she was warning them about. I let the silence stretch one extra second. Then I nodded once and stepped aside, letting her pass, letting her keep her spotless image. Inside my coat pocket, my fingers closed around Ethan's little silver key again, and I made a quiet decision I did not share with anyone there. I would not fight Brittany in the hallway of a church. I would wait until I could fight her with facts. By the time the coffee cups emptied and the last polite hugs were exchanged, the fellowship hall had thinned into little knots of people talking about weather and work, anything that was not Ethan. I kept my hands folded in front of me, fingers laced so tightly my knuckles looked pale, and I watched Brittany like I used to watch Ethan on the Little League field when he was 9, scanning for trouble before it happened. The difference was that Ethan had always run toward home. Brittany was guarding something she did not want anyone else to touch. Dana approached again, this time with a brittle energy. Her mouth set like she had rehearsed what she was about to say. "Margaret," she began, "Brittany is going to head back to the funeral home to finalize a few things. She asked if you could leave her to it. She needs to handle the paperwork." The word paperwork hit my ears like a bell. I forced myself to keep my face calm. I said, "Finalizing what?" Dana's eyes flickered toward Brittany, then away. "You know," she murmured, "the details. Flowers. Receipts. That sort of thing." It was not the details that bothered me. It was the urgency. There was no reason to rush anything at a reception after the service, unless you were afraid of someone asking questions. Brittany drifted close, her smile ready, her voice sweet enough to fool a stranger. "Margaret," she said, "I appreciate you coming today. I really do. But I am exhausted. I think it is best if I go take care of things and you go home and rest. You have had a hard day." She spoke as if she were offering kindness, but her fingers tightened on the strap of her purse, anchoring it against her side. My eyes went there again, to the place where the pale envelope had disappeared. I wanted to ask her what she had put inside her purse. I wanted to ask her why she had to keep it close like that, like it might run away. But I could feel the room watching in the way people do when they sense tension, hungry for relief and ready to blame whoever breaks the silence. So I nodded as if I agreed. "You are right," I said. "I will go." Brittany's shoulders loosened just slightly. Victory made her lighter. She leaned in for a brief hug that felt more like a tap on my back, then turned away to collect her coat. As I walked toward the side hallway, I noticed a door propped open with a rubber wedge, leading to a small office where volunteers had stored extra programs and supplies. A stack of folders sat on a chair, and on top was a clipboard with a label that read "Hail, Ethan." My breath caught. I did not step inside. I did not touch anything. I only looked long enough to see a corner of a familiar handwriting beneath a paperclip, the kind of looping print my son used when he wrote me grocery lists. Then Brittany's heels clicked behind me, and I kept walking steady, unhurried, as if I had not seen a thing. Outside, the air bit at my cheeks, and I stood beside my car for a moment, letting the cold clear my head. I did not have proof yet, but I had a direction. Brittany could keep her purse and her performance. I would follow the trail she was trying so hard to hide. That night I did not turn on the television. I did not call anyone to talk about how unfair the day had been. I went home, locked my front door, and stood in my kitchen with my coat still on, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator like it was the only steady thing left in the world. Ethan's spare key, the one I had kept on my ring for years, felt heavier than it should have. I set my purse on the table and stared at my hands for a moment, noticing how they had started to look like my mother's, the veins more visible, the skin thinner, the nails neatly filed out of habit. Then I made myself move. Grief can turn you into a statue if you let it. I filled a kettle, heated water, and made tea I barely tasted. At the edge of my living room, a small wooden box sat on a shelf, the kind you buy at a craft store, and then never replace because it becomes sacred by accident. Inside were the practical scraps of motherhood you never throw away. Ethan's first baby bracelet from the hospital, a faded birthday card with a crooked drawing, and a manila envelope he had given me 6 months earlier when he stopped by after work. He had been in a hurry that day, kissing my cheek, smiling like nothing was wrong. But his eyes had lingered on me as if he wanted to be sure I understood. "Mom," he had said, "put this somewhere safe, okay? Just in case." I had tried to tease him, asking if he was planning to rob a bank. He had laughed, but it was thin. "Just keep it," he had repeated. "Promise me." I had promised. I had not opened it then because he asked me not to. I had told myself it was something for taxes, something boring. Now, with the house silent and Ethan gone, boring felt like a luxury. I took the manila envelope out and ran my thumb along the flap. It was sealed with one strip of tape pressed down neatly. My breath sounded loud in my ears. I hesitated, not because I was afraid of what I might find, but because opening it felt like crossing a line Ethan had drawn for a reason. Then I thought of Brittany's purse and the way she tucked that pale envelope away like a secret. I thought of Dana telling me to sit farther back. I thought of how quickly Brittany wanted me gone. I peeled the tape carefully so I would not tear anything. Inside was a folder with copies organized, labeled in Ethan's handwriting. A list of account numbers with the last digits obscured, a note about a life insurance policy, a contact name for an attorney in Columbus, and a short letter addressed to me. My hands shook as I unfolded it. The first line stopped my heart in a different way than grief had. It was not dramatic. It was Ethan being Ethan, steady and plain-spoken. He wrote that he loved me, and that if I was reading this it meant things had gone sideways and he needed me to be careful. He mentioned Brittany by name. He did not call her cruel. He did not call her evil. He only wrote one sentence that felt like a door clicking shut. Do not sign anything or give up any rights until you speak to Mr. Alan Mercer. I read it twice, then a third time because my mind kept trying to reject it. Ethan had anticipated this. He had prepared. And Brittany somehow was already moving as if she knew what was coming. I set the letter down, stared at the attorney's number, and for the first time since the hospital, I felt something other than sorrow fill my chest. It was not rage. It was clarity. In the morning, the world looked rude in its normalness. Sunlight slid through my kitchen blinds and laid stripes across the table like nothing had happened, like my son was not gone. I had slept in fragments, waking with the same thought each time. Ethan left me a warning. The kettle whistled, and I poured coffee even though my stomach did not want it. Then I sat down with the folder again, reading every page slowly, the way you read a medication label when you are afraid of making a mistake. There were numbers, names, and one small card with an address for Mercer and Associates in Columbus, Ohio, plus a direct line. I did not call right away. I forced myself to get dressed first, hair brushed, shoes on, because I needed my body to understand we were moving forward. It was barely 9 when I dialed. A receptionist answered with a bright, practiced tone, and when I said Alan Mercer's name, my voice came out steadier than I felt. "This is Margaret Hale," I said. "My son Ethan Hale asked me to contact him if anything happened." The pause on the other end told me my words landed in a place already prepared. "One moment, Mrs. Hale," she said, and I heard the soft click of a transfer. Alan Mercer's voice was calm, the kind of calm that comes from years of watching people panic. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "I am very sorry for your loss." I thanked him because that is what you do, and then I got to the point before I could lose my nerve. "My daughter-in-law is acting like I do not exist," I said. "She has been collecting paperwork and keeping things close. My son left me a letter. He told me not to sign anything or give up rights until I spoke to you." There was another pause, but this one felt different, like he was choosing his words carefully. "You did the right thing calling," he said. "First, do not sign any documents Brittany presents to you, including anything that looks like a simple acknowledgement or a release. Second, do not hand over originals of what you have. Keep them secure." My fingers tightened around my coffee mug until the heat stung. What rights could she be trying to get me to give up? I asked. He exhaled quietly. Ethan was concerned there might be pressure around beneficiary designations, personal property, and certain authorizations. He arranged matters in a specific way. Some of those arrangements only work if no one can bully others into waiving claims. Bully. The word was not dramatic, but it described the shape of what I had felt in that church hallway. I swallowed and asked the question that had been sitting in my throat since Brittany's purse. Is there something she would want to hide? Alan Mercer did not accuse. He did not speculate wildly. He simply said, "There are documents that clarify Ethan's wishes. If Brittany has possession of any materials from the funeral home or hospital that were meant to go to the family as a whole, she may be trying to control the narrative." Narrative. That was exactly it. "What do I do today?" I asked. "Today," he said, "you gather information quietly. If you can, obtain copies of the funeral contract and any receipts. If Brittany contacts you, keep communication in writing. And Mrs. Hale, if you believe she is withholding something that belongs to the estate or to you, we handle it through proper channels. No confrontation alone." When I hung up, the house was still quiet, but it no longer felt like a trap. Felt like a planning room. I opened my phone, created a new notes page, and wrote down every detail I could remember from yesterday. The pale envelope, the clipboard labeled with Ethan's name, the way Brittany rushed me out. Then I looked at Ethan's silver key on my ring. and I knew exactly where I needed to go next. The key fit Ethan's old front lock like it remembered my hand. I parked 2 houses down from the place Brittany and Ethan had shared, not because I was sneaking, but because I did not want a neighbor to call her out of misplaced loyalty. The morning air had warmed just enough to smell like wet sidewalks and budding trees, and my hand still shook as I walked up the path. I told myself I was not doing anything wrong. I was his mother. I was family. And I had a letter in my purse that proved Ethan wanted me paying attention. Inside, the house felt staged, too tidy for a home that had just lost a person. The throw blanket was folded with crisp edges. The counters were wiped clean. Even the mail on the entry table had been stacked like a display. Brittany had been busy. I did not wander. I did not open drawers like a thief. I moved with purpose, straight to the small office nook off the living room where Ethan used to pay bills on a laptop that always ran hot. On the desk sat a black folder labeled Utilities, and a second one labeled Medical. My throat tightened when I saw Ethan's handwriting on sticky notes. Simple reminders, dates, a phone number. I opened the folder slowly, looking only for copies, the kind Alan Mercer had told me to gather. The funeral contract was not there. But I did find a receipt from the hospital for personal effects release, a standard form with Ethan's name and a signature line that had been signed by Brittany the morning he passed. Under it, clipped to the page, was a small carbon copy slip that said items released. Wedding band, phone, wallet, keys. My eyes stuck on wedding band. Brittany had worn a ring yesterday, but I had not seen Ethan's band. I swallowed hard and took a photograph of the slip with my phone, making sure the date and the facility name were clear. Then I heard a car door slam outside. My whole body went still. I stood quietly and listened. A man's voice floated in from the driveway, casual, not Brittany's. A neighbor, maybe. I waited until the voice faded. Then I moved again, faster now but still careful. On the desk was a small tray for mail. Under a stack of condolence cards lay a folded paper from Mercer and Associates, the corner stamped with their logo, as if it had been delivered and then buried. I did not open it. I photographed the front, then slid it back exactly as I found it. That was when my phone buzzed. Brittany's name lit up the screen like a warning flare. I did not answer. It buzzed again, then stopped. A moment later a text appeared. "Where are you? We need to meet about some paperwork today." My pulse thudded but my mind stayed oddly clear. Alan Mercer had said keep communication in writing. So I typed slowly, choosing words that sounded harmless. "I am at home resting. Please tell me what paperwork, and I will review it with counsel before signing anything." I stared at the message before I sent it, feeling the shift it created. This was the first time I had placed a boundary she could not smile past. When I hit send, I felt my hands go cold. I looked around the quiet house one more time, at the neat surfaces and the missing pieces, and I understood what Brittany was really afraid of. She was not afraid of my grief. She was afraid of my questions. By noon Brittany's replies came fast, each one sharper than the last, as if my simple sentence had pulled a thread she could not stop yanking. "We need to settle things. There are forms. It is standard." Then when I did not bite, she switched tactics. "Ethan would not want delays. You are making this harder." I sat at my kitchen table with my phone face up, letting her messages stack like a tower built on impatience. I could almost hear her voice, sweet for an audience and slicing when no one was watching. I remembered Alan Mercer's warning and forced myself to stay boring, calm, and precise. "Please email the documents. I will review them with counsel." That was all I sent. 10 minutes later my phone rang again. I let it go to voicemail. Her message arrived a minute later, breathy and controlled. "Margaret, I do not know why you are doing this. We can meet at the funeral home at 2 and just sign what we need to sign. I am trying to be respectful." Respectful. The word sounded like a costume she wore when it suited her. I did not want a private meeting. Alan Mercer had said no confrontation alone, and I understood why. Brittany did better behind closed doors. So I chose a place with neutral walls and witnesses, a place she could not claim later that I had raised my voice or said something outrageous. I texted back. "I will be at Mercer and Associates at 3:30. If you have paperwork, bring it there." Her response came immediately, and it made my stomach tighten. "Why would I go to your lawyer? This is between you and me." I stared at the screen and felt the trap closing and for the first time saw the opening. If Brittany truly believed she had everything locked down, she would have agreed. Her refusal told me there was something she did not want seen by anyone trained to read fine print. I did not argue. I did not explain. I simply wrote, "If it is standard, there is no reason to avoid counsel." Then I set the phone down and let silence do the work. An hour passed before she tried a softer angle. "Mom, please. I cannot handle more stress. Ethan's friends are coming over tonight. I just need this done." The sudden mom felt rehearsed, like a line dropped in to pull at sympathy. I pictured Ethan's friends, the way they had hugged me at the service, the way their eyes had searched mine as if they were trying to recognize the family they used to know. If Brittany planned another gathering, she wanted control of the room again. She wanted an audience. Fine. If she wanted witnesses, I could use them too. I replied, "I hope his friends are doing okay. I will drop off a few of Ethan's things I saved from childhood. I can bring them by around 6. Just tell me who will be there." The message was bait, wrapped in something that sounded kind. I watched the typing bubbles appear and disappear. Then her answer arrived, too quick, too eager. 6 is fine. Just a few people. Do not bring paperwork talk. We will keep it simple. And there it was, the line she could not help drawing. Keep it simple, keep it quiet, keep Margaret in her assigned place. I picked up my pen and wrote her words into my notes exactly as she sent them. Then I circled one phrase Alan Mercer had said, the one that mattered most. Control the narrative. Brittany had just handed me proof she was trying. At 5:45 I parked across the street and sat for a moment with both hands on the steering wheel, letting my breathing settle. In my passenger seat was a small shoebox wrapped in brown paper and tied with kitchen twine. The kind of ordinary package that does not look like a weapon, until you remember that memories can be sharper than any argument. Inside were Ethan's childhood things I had saved. A worn baseball glove, a paper certificate from 3rd grade, a photo strip from a mall booth where he made silly faces and then suddenly smiled like himself. In my purse was my phone, charged and ready, with Brittany's messages saved, and a single printed copy of Ethan's letter in a plain envelope. I had already spoken with Alan Mercer again briefly, and he had told me exactly what to do if Brittany tried to corner me. Do not debate, do not accuse, do not explain, only place the truth in the right hands. When I walked up to the door, I could hear voices inside, low and careful, like people trying to be respectful in a room that no longer felt like a home. Brittany opened the door with that same polished face, but her eyes flashed when she saw the shoebox. "Oh," she said, too bright. "You really brought things." I stepped in and offered a small smile that gave her nothing to push against. In the living room, Ethan's friends were there, 3 men in their 30s, who looked like they had not slept. One of them, Ryan, stood up immediately. His eyes were red. "Mrs. Hale," he said, and his voice cracked on the word. He hugged me with a gentleness that surprised me, and I realized how badly I had needed someone to acknowledge that I belonged. Brittany hovered near the kitchen, pretending to arrange napkins that did not need arranging. I set the shoebox on the coffee table and opened it slowly. The room quieted. Ryan picked up the baseball glove and laughed softly through his sadness. "He talked about this," he said. "He said his mom kept everything." Another friend, Miguel, lifted the photo strip and shook his head. "That is Ethan," he murmured like it was a prayer. Brittany tried to reclaim the moment with a sigh. "This is nice," she said, "but we should not get stuck in the past. We have to move forward." Her gaze slid to me, warning and impatient. I looked at the men on the couch, at their honest grief, and I knew this was the only audience that mattered. I reached into my purse and pulled out the plain envelope. I did not wave it. I did not dramatize it. I simply placed it on the table beside the shoebox. "Ethan asked me to keep something safe," I said, my voice steady. "He wrote this for me, and he mentioned an attorney, Alan Mercer. He asked me not to sign anything or give up any rights until I spoke to him." Brittany's breath caught, quick and sharp, and her face tightened before she could smooth it. "That is private," she snapped, then tried to soften it with a smile that did not fit. "Margaret, do not confuse people." Ryan looked from Brittany to me, his brow furrowing. "Why would she have to sign anything?" he asked quietly. Brittany's eyes flicked to him, then to Miguel, then back to me, calculating. "It is just standard," she said too fast. I nodded once. If it is standard, it can go through counsel, I replied. No accusations. No shouting. Just a boundary you could measure. Brittany's hands curled into fists at her sides. Then she forced them open. You are making me look bad, she whispered, close enough for only me to hear. I met her eyes and kept my voice calm. You did that yourself, I said, just as quietly. Then I turned to Ethan's friends and added louder, if any of you have memories, photos, messages from Ethan that you think matter, please keep copies. Do not let anything important disappear. Brittany's face drained of color. She stepped back as if the room had shifted under her. Ryan set the glove down with care and looked at me with something like respect. He trusted you, he said. My throat tightened, but I held myself together. I gathered the letter back into my purse, not to hide it, but to protect it, and I lifted the shoebox lid again. Take something, I told them, if you want. Ethan would have liked that. They each chose a small piece of his story, and the room warmed in a way I had not felt since before the hospital call. When I finally stepped outside, the evening air was cool and clean. I did not feel victorious. I felt anchored. Brittany could call me names in a church hallway, but she could not rewrite the truth of who I was to my son. And as I walked to my car, I realized that Ethan had not left me a warning only to defend myself. He had left me a way to carry his voice forward, steady and clear, when mine wanted to break.